Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at Purelite Ventures Presents. What we are doing here today is we are talking to Dr. Swathi Varanasi-Diaz. We are excited to have her because she is an expert when it comes to nutraceuticals, when it comes to consumer product goods, and also health tech. She has helped founders to get to exit. She knows her way around the various hurdles that stop founders from getting from point A to point B. And so we are so excited to have her. And we're going to talk a little bit more about her background in a moment. But first, I would also like to let you know that today at Purelite Ventures, we also have an additional fellow. His name is Emmanuel Tutu, and he is joining us. He is very well steeped in the healthcare scene, as well as venture capital. And what he is doing today is he's helping to moderate. He's also going to be available for you to send your decks to, as well, if you'd like us to review them at Purelite Ventures. Now, Purelite Ventures, as you may know, is a healthcare specific venture capital firm. And what we do is we invest in seed stage ventures that we believe can transform healthcare and help all of us to live healthier and happier lives. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Dr. Swathi Varanasi. And I will do this by first telling you a little bit about what she has done and what she's doing. So Dr. Swathi Varanasi-Diaz, also known as Dr. Swathi, is an award-winning pharmacist. She's passionate about the intersection of personalized medicine and healthcare. As a consultant, advisor, and fractional executive, Dr. Varanasi-Diaz runs Varanasi Company and works with clients across CPG, consumer healthcare, health tech, and media. Dr. Varanasi-Diaz is a recurring medical expert on radio and TV with different media outlets like CBS, ABC, and NBC, and has served as a faculty member at universities. She has been published in peer-reviewed academic journals and featured in Yahoo, mindbodygreen, Well+Good, Forbes Health, Thrive Global, and more. In 2023, Dr. Varanasi-Diaz was voted one of the 50 most influential leaders in pharmacy. Amazing. And Dr. Varanasi-Diaz received her Doctor of Pharmacy at the Medical University of South Carolina, a Bachelor's of Arts at Carleton College, and she's the first pharmacist in the United States of America with a formal postdoctoral residency training, specializing in integrative medicine and preventative health. She completed a postdoctoral fellowship in medical affairs and has a nutrition certificate from Cornell University. And might I add, she is wonderful in terms of baking. She shared with me a recipe that I'm using right now that I thank her for. Welcome, Dr. Varanasi-Diaz.
Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me?
Hi, can you repeat that? I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? I just adjusted something. Can you hear me now?
So I think what we're going to do right now is we're having a little bit of a technical difficulty. So I'm going to refresh this and come right back to you both. Give me 1 second.
Okay. Thank you so much to everyone who's here and for sticking with our technical difficulty. If you can't hear me, let me know. But we should be back to our normal scheduled programming very soon.
Thank you for taking control of that. I appreciate it.
No worries.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me? Okay.
Lovely, lovely. So welcome again, Dr. Varanasi-Diaz. I hope that everybody got to hear a little bit about what you're doing and what you've done in the past, because it's extraordinary.
So I haven't shared anything additional to what you said, but I can give a little bit of background about what interested me in pharmacy and a little bit about what I do now, if you'd like.
I would love that. Please do.
Yeah, sure. So just to back up all the way. So my parents are immigrants from India. My dad was an organic chemist and my mom was a nurse. So was always kind of around healthcare and science. And actually both of them worked in the pharmaceutical industry. I grew up in New Jersey. So as most of you probably know, that's a hotbed of a lot of, pharmaceutical and biotech companies. So grew up with, talking about that type of stuff at, the dinner table. And the pharmacists that I knew growing up were not the ones who were in, your quintessential pharmacy. The ones that I knew were either business owners. So they, they own their own businesses. Maybe they were in consulting, or they worked in the pharmaceutical industry. So I viewed pharmacy as this opportunity to get a great education and just do a bunch of different things after that sound interesting, from, marketing all the way to owning my own business. So that's what got me initially interested in pharmacy. And then while I was in pharmacy school, I was trying all sorts of things, from research to being elected to national boards of organizations. And I really was wanting to try absolutely everything to understand where I fit within the pharmacy kind of sphere. And so I did a clinical rotation with an integrative pharmacist who started her practice in the 80s. So likely one of the first integrative pharmacies, Dr. Pam Tarlow, and her practice was a combination of teaching and mentorship, as well as consulting and clinical care. And I loved the variety and the impact she was able to have on healthcare providers around her in like a collaborative environment, but also on the patients and upcoming students that were interested in this. So we decided to start the first ever and still only postdoctoral residency training program for pharmacists interested in integrative medicine. And everyone kind of defines integrative medicine a little bit differently. To me, integrative medicine and the way that, my mentor and I define it is, it's more of an and rather than an or. It's thinking about when the pharmaceutical agents or the FDA approved, prescription medications are the best fit for a patient, but when also we can think about preventative health and quality of life. And that might be through the lens of nutrition or supplementation, herbal medicine, acupuncture, movement, sleep, and all of these other aspects of lifestyle that are just as important. And so it's really, thinking about it from a whole person perspective and how we can help shape and improve that person's life through all these different modalities. Then after I did that, I did clinical care as well as served as adjunct faculty and assistant faculty for a while, educating on these topics. Then, as you mentioned, I did a postdoctoral fellowship in industry. And then after that, worked in Healthtech and CPG. And this was when I realized, especially when I made that transition from industry to Healthtech and CPG, that, the pharmaceutical industry, their org structure is really great. And there are some key benefits that I think Healthtech and CPG can benefit from. And one of those needs that I identified was medical affairs. And so for those of you who are not familiar with medical affairs, it's really the internal medical expertise that either helps with publication strategy or clinical trial strategy or engaging with healthcare providers from an educational lens. And so that's what I started doing, was filling this gap that I found in Healthtech and CPG with this expertise that I gained from industry and my residency in medical affairs. So that's a little bit about my background and what I do now.
Fantastic. Thank you for that background. And this leads me to ask you, what are nutraceuticals? Could you define that? And especially in terms of venture capital, because a lot of founders are coming out with different innovations, but they're not technically pharmaceuticals, but they are things that are helping them to thrive. So please share.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry to cut you off. But yes, nutraceuticals are a broad category of products that are generally derived from food sources. They could also be derived from plant sources that provide health benefits that are beyond basic nutrition. So things that could be bioactive singular compounds from, let's say, from like turmeric, the active ingredient is curcumin. So that could be considered a nutraceutical. They could include dietary supplements, functional foods, medical foods, and botanicals, as I mentioned. And oftentimes they are used to prevent or manage diseases, particularly when they're used in like a comprehensive setting. So they're used as a part of a regimen rather than only using the nutraceutical on its own. And as I mentioned, curcumin deriving from turmeric could be an example. Omega-3 fatty acids could be an example of that, whether they're derived from, like a fish or a chia seed. And then also probiotics is a great example.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I'm thinking about consumer product goods now that you mention it. And could you talk a little bit about that in terms of the nutraceuticals that you just defined for us?
Yeah, so CPG or consumer product goods actually is the kind of more overarching umbrella because consumer product goods could be anything from foods to beverages to supplements to health foods to even skincare products. And oftentimes those are things that can be purchased without, not oftentimes, sorry, but there are things that can be purchased without a prescription. So that could be, something that you get in a retail setting. Maybe you're picking up your protein bars, but you're also picking up your skincare products. And then you might also be grabbing that curcumin supplement, which is a nutraceutical. So all of these kind of fall under the CPG umbrella. So nutraceuticals are a subsect of consumer product goods.
Wonderful. And when we think about this as well, you mentioned that they don't necessarily need a prescription. So they can be placed in supermarkets. They can be placed in all areas where people can buy food or can buy supplies. Now, with that being the case, it seems to me that there's a huge market for these goods, especially in your sphere. Would you
Yes.
agree with that? And is there anything that you'd like to share with us in terms of that?
Yes, definitely. I mean, there's so much interesting and innovation, and the TAM, or the total addressable market, is continuing to grow for so many of these products. Especially, we'll talk a little bit about this later, but it's like, especially with the focus of women's health, especially as of recent, and the focus on the aging population, especially as the boomers continue to get and seek more medical care. They're not only seeking that medical care through the conventional avenues, so to speak, of the prescription medications and going through the healthcare system. They're also thinking about, okay, like, what sorts of foods can I incorporate, especially as, as we age, we lose muscle. So for sarcopenic patients, how can we think about what foods can benefit muscle health, or what beverages, or what supplements, or even what skincare products? Because skincare, we need to, apply topically, but also there's a way of addressing skincare concerns from a supplement perspective, from a systemic perspective. And a lot of these, aspects don't require an FDA approved product. Of course, you can get skincare products that are FDA approved, but I'm kind of speaking from the CPG side, where you don't need a prescription. So it is something that there's so much great innovation going on right now. And I actually had the opportunity to go to the biggest CPG conference of the year last year, which is called Natural Products Expo West. And I can talk a little bit later about some of the trends and things that I noticed there.
I would love to hear a little bit about that now. You've got me excited.
Yes, definitely. So, in the past 3 weeks, there's been, two kind of big conferences, especially like in my niche of integrative medicine and CPG and health tech, right? So just, I guess, barring health tech, the two big conferences I want to talk about are the Integrative Health Symposium, which is the largest kind of evidence-based integrative medicine conference, which takes place in New York every single winter, and then Expo West, which is, it's called but like for short, but it's really the Natural Products Expo West, which takes place also in every winter. And it's kind of referred to as the annual CPG Olympics from people who are in the space, just because it is, almost 100,000 people attend, and there are thousands of booths, and they have not only food products, even though it is like predominantly food conference, there's also a bunch of supplements. And so to talk about some of the trends I saw, which this might not be anything that you haven't heard before, but from a food perspective, there's just protein in everything. That is the big thing from a food perspective, that, it's not just, eating a, plant-based yogurt. Like, I'll give the example of like Forager Project. They are cashew-based and coconut-based yogurt, really good. But now they have a protein plus line. And so not only is there like this integration of more protein, it's either plant-based or animal-based. And so over the past few years, we saw such, a focus on plant-based protein, plant-based just ingredients in general. And so I still see a lot of plant-based ingredients and products out there, plant-based proteins, but I will say that there's been an improvement in the taste and the texture and just in the overall ingredients, because before, a lot of those plant-based products did not have the cleanest of ingredients. So I've seen a lot of improvements there. And there's also been a resurgence of animal-based protein after, just many years of these plant-based alternatives. So that's kind of the first thing. The next thing I would say on like the food and beverage side is functional beverages, which I think have been kind of having a moment, but particularly this year, thinking about, how can we optimize energy, whether that's through caffeine, like matcha, or even thinking about bioactive ingredients that could be considered, what you'd put in a nutraceutical, but putting it in a functional beverage. And how also can these functional beverages be used for gut health? Like you probably saw the Poppy commercial during the Super Bowl. A lot of other brands are thinking about, okay, how can they create something to rival a Poppy? And then also mood boosting beverages with the addition of adaptogens. And also within the functional beverage space, just the no alcoholic space that is growing and thriving right now, with so many people, considering decreasing their general alcohol consumption. So those are two of from food and beverage. Also on the kind of food side, a lot of global and cultural flavors, more than I've ever seen before, which is really exciting. I think a lot of that is spurred from recent acquisitions in the space of Siete, for example, which was acquired for about $1 billion, which is a family-owned Mexican snack company. And so I think a lot of that has inspired a lot of more people from a lot of different cultures to join the conversation and create food and also beverage products that speak to their heritage, but are also, an interest to investors as well, because that is, something, we're becoming more of a globalized society. So people want to see themselves represented on the shelves of a grocery store or a supplement aisle. So there's that. The other thing that I wanted to mention was, for the food side, is the focus on regenerative and sustainability driven products. So before this used to be, especially I've been in the space for a while, it's before that used to be, a lot of products would say, you should buy us because of this. But I think now it's more of the value add kind of discussion of, we have all these great ingredients and all this stuff. Oh, and by the way, in addition, we are, using regenerative, agricultural practices, or we do have some sustainability, or we're 1% for the planet, or we are a B Corp or something like that, is kind of the additional value, rather than, you should buy us over another product for this specific reason. So that's kind of on the food side. If you want, I can pause and see if anyone has any questions, and then I can dive into the supplement trends I saw.
Yeah, we'll be opening the floor to questions in the last 15 minutes. So okay. I'm looking forward to hearing the questions that other people are going to be asking you. Many of the products that you mentioned, I'm using them. Like for instance, the yogurt, I buy Coco June. And I eat
love Coco June. So tasty.
It's delicious, right? But very good for you. But then at the same time, I've been creating my own probiotic drinks and my own probiotic sauerkrauts and things in my home, because sometimes I found it difficult to get them. But I would like to be able to have trusted brands that I can go to, so that I don't have to spend the weeks doing these ferments. So I think these are very important, because they're so important for gut health. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of this. And $1 billion exit for Siete. That is fantastic. And that's the kind of thing that venture capitalists love to hear, and founders love to hear. That's an encouragement to us to keep doing what we're doing. But yeah, continue. You were going to speak a little bit more, and you gave us a little pause.
Yes, absolutely. So those were some of the food trends, especially as they pertain to the Natural Products Expo West conference that I went to. And then now, drawing from both conferences that I mentioned, some of the supplement trends that I saw. So this is probably not a surprise either, but the GLP-1 support. So this is products that are either, such a surge of patients are taking GLP-1s. How can we support that process through, providing supplements that attack, appetite suppression or satiety, metabolism, blood sugar balance, those sorts of things. And also an intriguing number of GLP-1 alternatives, which I don't know if you saw the recent, I don't know if I should name the company, but there's a company that's very, very hypey right now that just got served with a lawsuit because they call their product GLP-1. So they're trying to position themselves as an alternative. And so I did see actually quite a bit of that at the conference as well. So I do think that is something that people need to be aware of, is that you can't be marketing a supplement product with the same claims as a prescription medication, because you are not an FDA approved product. Supplements by definition are not FDA approved. And so we need to ensure that whatever we're putting on the market and considering for patients and for our loved ones are actually, you know, they have like clinical evidence to support their use, and they're not being marketed as something that can do the same thing as a prescription when the studies are not there to support that. So that is definitely one of the trends, this whole GLP-1 kind of craze and how it relates to weight management. The next thing is the rise in fiber supplements. I mean, I've been saying for a while, I think fiber is the new protein. I think eventually that's where a lot of the food products are going to end up going in the next few years, is that, you know, the average American does not get enough fiber. I think it's like 95+% of Americans do not get enough dietary fiber in their daily intake or in their weekly intake. And so this is something the supplement industry has taken a hold of and is now creating a lot of fiber supplements, whether those come in powders that you mix with water or they come in capsule form, because it's just so important for our overall gut health and regularity. And I can make such a long list of things and reasons why fiber is just so important. And so that was one of the trends that I saw. The next thing is, I mentioned it briefly earlier, but just the continual focus, which I love to see, on women's health. And so that is, you know, especially as it pertains to different transitions in women's health. So that could be menopause, puberty, and just the aging women population in general. And so that continued focus I saw at the conference. And then the other thing is, in terms of a delivery system, gummies was a huge trend. I feel like that's been going on for a while, but especially as of recently, so many companies that maybe already have a formula that is a powder or that's a capsule, but they're transitioning a lot of the same active ingredients into gummies. I think overall, if the intention is, you know, we want our patients, our, you know, our loved ones to be taking these active ingredients, then I understand gummies could be a good fit. My issue with gummies is that oftentimes gummies have a lot of additives and preservatives and high sugar content and things like that. So there's still a lot of innovation needed, and very few companies who are looking at, okay, let's create gummies, but let's create them from a more clean, you know, lens, so to speak. So that is something that I hope to see the innovation in, kind of similar to what I was talking about with, you know, the plant-based revolution. It's like initially we just started with like, let's shove anything into a product just because it's plant-based. And then now I've seen so much improvement in the ingredient choices and the tastes and the texture and all of that. So I hope to see the same kind of transition for gummies in the future.
You know, that's really interesting. It makes me think about safety when we are looking at nutraceuticals and consumer goods, right? Because yes, you know, we do have very many plants, but we can't eat all of them. We can't digest all of them, right? So we have to think about it with a lens towards safety at all times. How much can a patient take? What is the dosage? What part of the plant is being used, right? Because sometimes they'll say to you, they're using this particular plant that is healthy for you, but is it the part of the plant that is actually effective, right? And I also love what you talked about when you mentioned fiber as the new it thing, because I worked for years in infectious diseases, and that's something that we are very aware of. If you want a healthy gut biome, you need fiber. You need prebiotics as well as probiotics. And that there are many probiotics out there that don't even survive going through the alimentary canal, right? So there's like a certain amount of honesty that has to be out there in terms of what's being used and how it's being used and what the efficacy and the dosage needs to be. I love gummies, by the way, but I try not to eat them because they're very sugary oftentimes. And I try to stay away from artificial sweeteners as well. So it's interesting that in terms of drug delivery, you mentioned this, because I would love to eat gummies every second of the day, but I can't.
I feel the same way. And I also really like that you brought up safety, because that's actually, when I'm thinking about like the industry on the whole, that is the biggest common misconception that I hear all the time is that just because something is not FDA approved does not mean that it's safe. And so this was especially when I worked in clinical care and I worked directly with patients. I used to hear this all the time, that people thought, I can just take this botanical or this supplement because, it's not FDA approved, and therefore like it must be safe, right? Because it's in a bottle, it's on the shelf. But very few supplements actually undergo clinical studies. And I think it's really important, if you're going to put something on the market, that you ensure that not only from a safety perspective, but also from an efficacy perspective, that it's going to actually, work for the patient population or therapeutic area you're trying to address. And so that is one of the biggest misconceptions. And particularly, one of the examples I feel like right now is berberine is everywhere. And everyone's calling it nature's Ozempic because it does work on a similar pathway of metformin. And so metformin is kind of the first line therapy when you're diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. You're put on metformin, and you don't generally get put on a GLP-1 or any of these other medications associated with diabetes until you max out on this metformin. And so a lot of people are using berberine as, like, I'm pre-diabetic, like, let me take berberine to kind of from a preventative perspective. A lot of people are also taking berberine from a more like biohacking perspective as well, to kind of optimize their blood sugar. But what a lot of people are not talking about is there's a lot of potential drug interactions with berberine. If it works on the same pathway as metformin, I mean, we have to think about, okay, great, then like how can this actually impact other medications or other supplements that we're taking? So just because it's a supplement or a botanical does not mean it's safe. And then I also really like that you brought up the part of the botanical or the part of the let's say the plant or even like the mushroom, for example, that you're using, and is that actually going to be effective? So this is something like, if you want to have a takeaway, when you're looking for products, maybe you're interested in medicinal mushrooms. So I'm thinking like a chaga or a reishi or a cordyceps, like any of those sorts of products that you should always be looking for in the ingredient list, that those medicinal mushrooms they come from the fruiting body. Because if they come from the mycelium, that's actually not the part that has been researched. And so that's just, kind of a key takeaway if you're looking to incorporate some of these adaptogens that are medicinal mushrooms, that you want to look for the fruiting body on the label rather than the mycelium.
Wow, that's some great information for us to carry forward. I also want to move a little bit away from that and talk about health tech. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you see as health tech and how it influences the venture capital ecosystem?
Yes, definitely. So health tech is a sector I've worked in quite a bit. And so it's pretty much, in short, it's a sector that leverages technology, and that could be, to improve healthcare delivery or patient outcomes or some sort of like operational efficiency. And it could include anything from digital health apps all the way to like wearable health devices or AI powered diagnostics. So it could be a lot of different things, and it could overlap with biotech or medtech or digital health. It kind of depends on who you're asking, and also like what particular goal is of the product. And then as it pertains to the healthcare VC ecosystem, actually, I work as a consultant for a VC firm that invests, kind of agnostically, but also in health tech. And so they're really interested in B2B SaaS. And so last year, I wrote a deep dive sector report on this exact topic of like what's cool, what's new, what's innovative, and what is actually out there right now that's talking about just, health tech and VC activity. But I wrote it, of course, through my clinical lens as a healthcare provider. And so some of the main things that I found is that, there are just there's so much activity going on in the space, which is quite interesting because especially after COVID, there was such a, slowdown. I'm not going to say standstill, but like a slowdown of, so much of the activity in the VC ecosystem. But health tech remained pretty resilient. And there was a lot of, shift in, AI powered healthcare solutions, particularly a lot of them had to do with clinical trial enablement, drug discovery, and diagnostics. And a lot of the actual investments were in provider operations, alternative care, and value-based care, or VBC. And so a lot of the VCs that were investing in this space were thinking about, okay, how can this value-based care model be applied to women's health, or mental health, or the aging population, or like other forms of specialty care that address high risk and high cost patient populations. And then a lot of focus in addition on like health data exchange and looking at it from like an efficiency perspective. So even though it seemed like a lot of what was going on in VC was slowing down, there were a lot of really great and big deals. And I do think for the future, there will be more deals like that focus not on the hyper growth that we were seeing in COVID, post-COVID, but understanding a little bit more of what is actually happening in the space and what's a bit more reasonable, because there were so many, as you probably know, there were so many bridge rounds. And so how can we avoid bridge rounds from a VC perspective and continue to think about optimizing, workflow, healthcare navigation, digital therapeutics, and just patient care overall. Oh no, I think you're muted. Do you mind starting from the beginning?
Oh, thank you very much.
Yes.
So this makes me think about exits, for instance. So when we talk about venture capital, we are looking for the best companies, the best startups that can influence the world, but of course, through the lens of the exit, the IPO, right? And that being the case, I would love you to speak a little bit about that and how it pertains to what you do and what you've done.
Yeah, definitely. So in the past, I would say few months, I can talk about some exits and how I played a role in them, and also some of the just exciting things going on, in the space. So one of the companies, Feminade, it's a femtech company. They were one of the first consumer initiated testing companies in the women's health space. They're naturopath and kind of business led. So for them, I helped them run a clinical study and to, really leverage those insights that we gained from that study across different materials, whether that was, social media, blog, investor decks. And they recently announced their acquisition by Superpower Health. And so that's a larger testing company. And so it was a strategic acquisition, which is exactly what they were looking for at the time, which was perfect. And to be able to be with them from, when I worked with them initially, that was, 2021. And so to see how much they've grown and progressed and how I could play a role in the importance of having these clinical insights. Because I say clinical insights because they're, what we learned from doing the clinical study and how this product was actually benefiting the customer and their overall experience with it, but their clinical outcomes, of course. And it's not only just the insights we gained from them, to create better products and, to optimize what they're doing internally. We use so much of that information actually in investor decks. So it's something that when I work with companies, I advocate for them to consider clinical research because a lot of the companies that I work with, they're not only, selling direct to consumer or maybe in retail, they're also thinking about, okay, how can I use my product in the context of healthcare? And so that might be through, a clinic or through a healthcare provider that has like a brick and mortar or a telemedicine practice. And so how can I help them either run the clinical study or then use the insights from information that they already have to then, be a better fit for what an investor is looking for or for a strategic M&A. So that's one example. And then another one, I can't talk about all the details because it's very, very, very much in progress, but a Healthtech brand where I helped the founder and the founding team with healthcare provider engagement. So they had already done some clinical studies with university partners. And so my goal was to educate the healthcare providers that they were already working with and also continue to create more of a network of healthcare providers within that particular niche therapeutic area. And then we also included a lot of that information in investor decks and other materials. And now they're knock on all the wood and cross your fingers and toes, but they have some very exciting conversations going on right now that hopefully will be live sooner than you think. So yeah, it's been great to be able to leverage both my clinical background and my background in medical affairs and in industry, and now in health tech and CPG, to position these companies and help position them to be a great target for these acquisitions.
Fantastic. I was just thinking, and you touched on it to a good extent, how your background as a pharmacist has actually allowed you to use that platform to help people who are in the nutraceutical space to succeed. So they're like, in terms of creating studies, clinical studies, you're a master at that. So you're able to take these companies, get real proof of concept, and deliver them in the form of a deck and also to the patients. So I think that's fantastic. Another thing that I'm thinking about as well is, how do you help them create the traction that they need in terms of gaining customers or customer acquisition? And also, once they do get this traction, like with these partnerships, in terms of gaining revenue, how can this be structured for them?
Yeah, so I mean, from the clinical study perspective, it's like, companies can do clinical studies for so many reasons. That could be validation, use case, that could be safety, and it also could be a marketing claim substantiation. So maybe they want to say that it helps support gut health, and then they can run a study with validated tools and the right questionnaires, the right patient population to be able to substantiate a marketing claim like that through a clinical study. And so I think oftentimes a lot of what I'm helping companies with is like, maybe they've already done the study, that's great, but maybe if they haven't, how can we leverage either their current customer population or like the larger set out there to create these studies so that they do stand out in a crowded market. And oftentimes in the nutraceutical market, it is pretty crowded, and there might be quite a few products trying to do the same thing, but really demonstrating that this product works for this use case. And I always say we're in the age of the conscious consumer. Like, consumers are currently, especially the educated consumer, is obsessed with trying to figure out before they spend their money if this product is actually going to make a difference for them, which is why I advocate so much for having just quantitative data that speaks to that. And so that's from the customer side directly. But let's say from the healthcare provider side, which is most of the companies I'm working with, are thinking about this like new channel of healthcare providers. And so healthcare providers, more than anything, want to see the data. Like, they're used to talking to the MSLs or the medical science liaison or the pharmaceutical salespeople from the pharmaceutical industry, who are presenting them with the data. And so that's what they are used to. So if you want to be able to be considered to be recommended by a healthcare provider, then you have to be able to demonstrate that data. And then from a partnerships perspective, what has really worked in my experience is just aligning with like-minded brands. So this could be a similar mission, a similar founder story, a similar audience, a similar set of values, likely a combination of those things, because it's not just looking for visibility, because a lot of the time these partnerships, you're like, oh my gosh, I want to align with, insert this huge, massive multinational billion-dollar brand. Oftentimes small companies are not able to do that. And so instead it's like, how can I gain credibility from being associated with another brand that might not be that huge. But I mean, that's one of the benefits of going to a conference like this, or rather, and either of the two conferences that I spoke about before, is that if you are in these spaces, that's really the moment when you can create these like long lasting relationships and start those relationships at the conference and then continue them after, to see how this partnership could maybe turn into an M&A. Who knows? And a lot of that comes from, how do you get that first entry point, because that's, I think, been one of the like largest barriers of like creating these partnerships, is like, how do you get that first entry point? Because you can send LinkedIn messages and you can find, their emails and things like that, but having that first in-person interaction followed up with kind of the digital async relationship, I think has really been very fruitful. And it's not just about increasing the reach, but it's more of that strategic fit and ensuring that it really does align with both parties.
I love that. And that leads me to asking you a little bit more about Varanasi Company, and what stage is best for a founder of a startup to reach out to you to get help with all the things we've spoken about.
Definitely. So, so far I've worked with predominantly companies who are between seed and Series B. But I have also, there's also been a few companies that have, found me, and I've worked with, larger companies as well. So it's kind of when companies have already defined, most of them are not FDA approved, and they have already kind of defined, okay, we have this target customer, we're already selling pretty productively to this direct to consumer or through retail channels already. And so they're ready to diversify. And so through diversification, I mean, like, from this omni-channel approach, how can they add this new channel of healthcare providers, and how can they get themselves ready to be an appealing option? So this could be, I could help them set up an affiliate model. I could help them actually do the outreach to the healthcare providers. But in the midst of that, it's thinking about clinical studies and data. It's thinking about what sort of materials do these healthcare providers want to see, whether it's a deck or a webinar or a white paper or a series of blog posts or educational videos, all those sorts of things. And then understanding where their product really fits in the patient journey. Because let's say it's a GLP-1 support product. So the patients that we're targeting, are already taking GLP-1. So thinking about what providers are in that space that we can speak to, what sort of information are they already being fed from various, other entities. So be that like a pharmaceutical company talking about their GLP-1 product, and how do we position ourselves to be an amazing support for their satiety? And how does this product fit into that? And how can it be used? And then what sort of information can we provide to help the provider make that decision? So I hope that answers your question. It's really when those companies are ready to diversify and start working with healthcare providers. And if they haven't done studies, that's fine. I can help you with that. And then how can we think about, getting your product to this next level?
That's fantastic. I would like to open this up for questions if we can start that. I think that's going to be exciting. And I think Emmanuel has the first question, actually. Okay. So I'm going to place that up for you to answer that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So can I speak about the regulatory aspect of nutraceuticals? Absolutely. Yeah. So the regulatory aspect is very important because, nutraceuticals are not FDA approved. And so it is something where you could create the product, and in like the simplest terms, you could create the product in your garage and then sell it on Amazon. Like, that is something that you could do. And so it is very important to ensure that when you are putting out these products, that you have some sort of regulatory oversight, because a lot of the regulatory issues that these nutraceutical companies have, or these supplement products have, is that they make claims that are unsubstantiated. And so likely it's, people who are, I always say this, but like the people in the supplement industry, they've started these brands oftentimes because it's something they have struggled with, or someone in their circle or their loved ones have struggled with, and therefore they want to provide something for more than just them, because maybe they created it for them, but they really want more people to have access to this to improve their quality of life. And so sometimes I see on products that are being sold online, oftentimes they won't get through the barrier of retail because the people within the retail sphere are like, we won't have something that says this product will, guaranteed to help you lose 40 pounds in the first week or something. Like, they will not put that on their shelf, but that is something that could be sold in the US online until the regulatory bodies, that could be the NAD or more likely the FTC. So that's the Federal Trade Commission. They're the ones in charge of advertising on supplement products. So they're the ones likely that will, they're constantly scouring the internet looking for products with these false claims or claims that sound a bit like prescription medications, like you can treat something. Supplements can't treat. And so if there are products that are non-FDA approved, like supplements that say treat, that is something where the regulatory bodies are they could potentially ask you to take the product down, likely with a very big fine associated with it. They could even sue you. So it could be a lot of different aspects. And so when you're thinking of creating a nutraceutical brand, it's very important to understand what you're putting on the packaging and also what ingredients you're putting in there, because some ingredients are perhaps not legal at certain doses, or they're not allowed, or maybe they're beyond the safety, they exceed the safety requirements. And so there's a lot of different aspects to creating a nutraceutical brand that's going to be, in alignment and make the regulatory bodies happy. So I hope that is like a start to your answer, but there's a lot more with the regulatory space that is fascinating.
This makes me think about the areas in which classical pharmacy or pharmaceuticals butt heads with nutraceuticals.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear your take on that, because you've lived in both worlds.
Definitely. It is a fascinating place to live in the area where I do, because a lot of the people who identify as integrative medicine specialists, they are oftentimes anti-prescription. They don't really believe that prescriptions are the right choice for anyone. Whereas the people on the prescription side oftentimes believe that supplements have no warrant, there's no studies, which for a lot of supplements, unfortunately, that is true. And the ones that I would advocate for and consider for patients are the ones that do have studies. So generally, depending on who you talk to, it's my side is the best and your side has no validity oftentimes. And so to be in the middle is a very fascinating place, because a lot of people don't really understand how I can look at both sides and make that, in my opinion, evidence-based or evidence-informed decision of, okay, let's look at this product, which is an FDA-approved prescription medication. Let's look at this product that's, a nutraceutical like curcumin. Let's look at and investigate what studies have been done on both sides, and then use my clinical discretion to understand which one could be the right fit for the patient. And for most patients, at least in my experience, it's oftentimes a combination of both. Because there are certain things that drugs can do and drugs are effective at, particularly for, some autoimmune conditions or heart conditions, that we can't rival with a supplement. And so, but what we can do is support a lot of these different aspects of quality of life and other preventative measures with supplements. So it's very patient specific, and you have to take that whole person approach and also understand what is the lifestyle of this person, because maybe a product is actually very stimulating, and so we don't want them to take it after noon, but maybe they're used to taking all their supplements at 6 p.m. with dinner, because you have to take some with food. So maybe they're like, oh, I take all of them after I get home from a long day of work with food. But we need to have that clinical discretion as the integrative medicine specialist to say, okay, amazing, take, these in the evening, but there are some that are maybe too stimulating that you need to consider taking in the morning. And also some supplements that you can't take at the same time as certain prescriptions. Like some antibiotics bind with, divalent cations. So that could be, you don't want to take your magnesium and your calcium at the same time you take certain antibiotics. That's just one example. But there's a lot of different things like that are, that are important with the timing and what's going to work for each patient.
That's really interesting. It makes me think about chronic disease. And often, like, not all chronic diseases, but some chronic diseases are based in our own habits. And because our own habits can tend to be difficult to shake, it's much more convenient for us to go the pharmaceutical route a lot of times, because we can take a certain pill to alleviate the symptoms. Maybe not cure the disease, but alleviate the symptoms. So I think there is, and with pharmaceuticals, there is a big push and a lot of success in curing disease, right? But we still have some diseases that we can only like peripherally treat. And I think nutraceuticals can be helpful, as you said, in supporting this. Even lowering dosages of certain types of medications.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's a great perspective. And we have to think about, taking a prescription, like, sometimes can be, but more oftentimes than not, it's not a one and done. Like, you take a medication, all of a sudden you're at your end goal. For most case scenario, that's not going to be the case. And we have to think about how our lifestyle and other aspects play a role in kind of optimizing the way these drugs or nutraceuticals work. And a great example is, the GLP-1s right now. Everyone's obsessively taking them. Not everyone, but a lot of people are taking them and getting those, prescriptions for their GLP-1s. But what a lot of people don't know is that, yes, you may lose, a dress size or two, but those are not meant for everyone. They're actually only FDA approved if you have a certain BMI, so 27 or above, with comorbid conditions, or 30 and above. And so you have to be at a certain level of, maybe you've tried a bunch of different ways to try to lose weight. And then I think potentially it could be a good fit for someone who falls into the FDA approved parameters. But I would add on to that, as we're taking these medications, not only do you lose fat, you also lose muscle. And muscle is so important and tied to longevity and cellular health and all of these other things that if you're taking this GLP-1 and expecting it to solve all your problems, that's just not going to happen, because as we age, we actually need more protein than what we needed before when we were younger. And so especially as we're losing more muscle as we age, we need to do something about improving the state of our muscle health. And so it's so important, if you're taking a GLP-1, to increase your muscle intake. And I do understand that on GLP-1s, generally your appetite is lower, just true. But in those times where you're actually consuming, think about like what sorts of foods you're eating: high protein, high fiber, and also incorporating strength training, or I always say start small. So it could be walking around the block with like 2 little cute weights in your hands. It could just be starting with that, but eventually working your way up to something where that does involve very light to heavy strength training, because you can't just take the GLP-1 and call it a day. It has to be a part of this larger change.
Wow, that is a real good nugget for us to take in, because, we do want the magic bullet. But we also do have to realize that pharmaceuticals do come from natural sources as well.
At least that's how they originated, yes.
Oh, we have another question.
Okay.
Yeah, so question for Dr. Swathi. How do you see the nutraceuticals market evolving over the next 5 to 10 years? Great question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would love to open the discussion if anyone else has anything to add as well. So I would say in the next 5 to 10 years, I see more of a focus on like clinically studied nutraceuticals. So, as the consumer gets more educated, the healthcare provider gets more interested in being a part of the kind of like revolution of preventative health, especially like in North America. I think that if healthcare providers and consumers are looking for what's actually working, a lot of that is going to come through clinical data. So I see that as like a big shift and change over the next few years. I would love to see some sort of regulatory improvement in what can actually be put on the market and maybe model that after other countries that are doing that really successfully, where you can't just create something in your garage and put it on Amazon. There are a lot of countries that don't allow that. I would also love to see, kind of tangentially to this, an improvement in what can be marketed to consumers from the nutraceutical space and the pharmaceutical industry space, because I don't know if you're aware, but there are only 2 or 3 countries in the world that allow prescription medications to be marketed to consumers. And the US is one of those markets. I'm pretty sure Australia is the only other one. Actually, maybe New Zealand as well. But it's Australia and the US are 2 of the largest countries that even allow that. So I would love to see an improvement in what can be said in those commercials, but also that applies to nutraceuticals as well, because right now you can have so many, different ads and things all over social media and TV that are all talking about nutraceuticals. And sometimes even what they're saying about what they're able to do for the patient or the consumer is not really validated in truth either. And oftentimes companies that have a lot of money can just kind of pay off these lawsuits that they already likely know are coming their way. So I'd like to see some shifts and improvements in that. I do think there is like no other choice. Like it kind of has to go in that direction, I think, because it can't necessarily get any worse. So I'd like to see some improvement there. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Wonderful. Oh, thank you for that. I don't know if there are any more questions, but I will say that I have learned a tremendous amount from you, Dr. Varanasi-Diaz. This has been fantastic. And I'd like to also ask you, how can people reach you? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, the best way would be through LinkedIn. So just, feel free to connect, and would love to hop on a call and chat. I also have my website too, which is drswathivaranasi.com. So, which is, on the banner right here. So if you have, if you'd like to check out more about what I do or send me an email, my email is also on the website. So you can contact me that way.
We have another question for you. Do you have time for one more?
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. All right. Okay. I'm excited. I love it when we have amazing questions, and I'd like to share that with you. So
Sure.
These pharmaceuticals typically have a timeline of 10 to 20 years from lab to market, with multiple clinical trials for safety and efficacy. Can you speak on the timeline of nutraceuticals and consumer products? And this comes from our own Emmanuel at Purelite Ventures.
Amazing. Great question. I mean, honestly, all the questions today have been so good. So the timeline actually is, there isn't really a set timeline, right? Because on nutraceuticals and consumer products, there are no specified required clinical trials that are needed pre-market. And so a lot of the products that I even help with clinical trials now, oftentimes they are not, before they're being put on the market. I have had the chance to be involved in a few, but most of them are the products already on the market. They already have, thousands of orders a month. And now they're thinking about, how can I substantiate some of the marketing claims that I have? Or how can I make even bolder marketing claims? Or the really exciting companies that are thinking about, how can I publish in an academic journal, which is huge, because then if you do an IRB approved clinical trial, you can publish in a journal, and that gives a new level of validity, especially if you want to engage with healthcare providers or you want to engage with investors. Because what I've found working with investors is that they love to see, not only has the product been studied, but it's been accepted to a peer-reviewed academic journal. So that's the other thing there, is that you just don't need any sort of validation of safety or efficacy before you put it on the market. What I found is oftentimes, well, I feel like I'm saying oftentimes a lot, but generally the supplement companies will base a lot of what they say off of the single ingredients they've selected. So let's say a product has, beef tallow, it has passion flower, it has kava kava, it has curcumin. They will base a lot of what the product can do for the consumer off of what these single ingredients have been studied for individually. And then later down the line, they will do a study that shows that their product with all of this kind of a proprietary blend or combination of ingredients, what that can do for the consumer, but that generally comes later. So in short, to answer your question on the timeline, could be a week. Like you have the idea and you find a company that can white label and put these different things in a capsule, and you can get it up on Amazon very quickly, just because of the kind of lack of regulatory oversight.
Wow, the questions keep coming. I think this will be our last question, if that's okay with
you. Okay, yes, we can do one more.
Yes. Love it though. So Ogohini Wukui Ufomo has a question, and yes, you can ask your question. Please do. We'll give him a second or so to type that. And so interesting. You have another question after that. This is great. Yes, this is great. So we'll just wait for him for a couple of moments. But you did say that we can reach you.
Yes,
and at your website. And you also told us about your company. And so we're extremely excited to partner with you in any way that we can, and also to direct our founders to you to help them when they're looking to advance anything in health tech, when they're looking to advance anything in terms of nutraceuticals, and when they need guidance in how to make the efficacy of what they're working on and working with more palatable to VCs based on efficacy, not on just hype. So
yes, absolutely. And I see the question came in. So how can nutraceuticals help in the mental health industry? Another amazing question. So nutraceuticals can be very beneficial in the mental health industry. And I think that a lot of that comes back to this whole person perspective on healthcare. And so, if let's say a patient is on an SSRI and they are doing very well in this SSRI, but they're realizing that maybe they actually want some help with sleep. So maybe that's where a nutraceutical could play a role. Maybe it's a passion flower or a kava kava or an L-theanine or something like that could be used for sleep, that they can take in conjunction with their SSRI. Again, depending on looking at both of these products and from a clinical discretion perspective, understanding can these two products be taken together safely and effectively. It might be that, we take a supplement for sleep, but we actually use a lower dose because they're taking the SSRI and we don't want it to interact. And the data demonstrates that the interaction's at a higher dose of the prescription medication. So that could be one of the ways, is that let's say a patient is taking this prescription medication, but they also want help with something else. So that's a way that it could work in tandem. I've also worked with patients who have tried so many SSRIs, SNRIs, and mood stabilizers and all these different things, and it's not really working for them. And so a lot of the patients that I used to work with in the clinic or in the pharmacy were, they wanted something else that could maybe work for them. And so sometimes it's assessing, let's say you're taking a low dose of amitriptyline and something else, but you also want to see what else you could safely incorporate with that. So that could be a 5-HTP, for example, or something. And what could be taken safely, especially if the product itself is not like a serotonin-based product. Maybe we can use a supplement that but instead targets serotonin, and we can use those together to get this kind of multi-prong approach to mental health. So I think that's a lot of it. And I think even beyond nutraceuticals for mental health, there's a lot of great research on certain foods that boost mood, like saffron, for example, that you could take as a supplement, but you also could incorporate in, your culinary pursuits as well. So there's a lot of different things that we can think about from mental health. But I'm all about, if the prescription is serving you, I don't want you to get off of it. Instead, I want to understand what we can potentially add from a lifestyle or nutraceutical perspective to make your life even better.
And I think health tech can also be applicable here. There might be
Absolutely.
light technologies that can be used, certain type of alarm clocks that can be used that wake people up in a way that is much different from the traditional loud noises that we hear, but steadily use light to do that. So I think that, and then lots of monitoring devices that can help with mental health in terms of blood pressure and the things that happen when people are experiencing anxiety attacks or different things. Those can be monitored by some of these health tech innovations. I think that's a fantastic thing too. So we have come to the end of this particular webinar, and I have so many more questions that I would like to ask you, but unfortunately we've run out of time. And so I thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming to share all of your knowledge with us. I am so excited to keep sharing your message. As you guys know, this is going to be on LinkedIn, so you can continue to watch it and share it with your friends. And I want to add Emmanuel back up to the stage so that you guys can also keep in touch with him as well. His email is et@purelite.vc. So if you have any ideas about the next topic you'd like to see on Purelite Ventures Presents, you can share that with him. Also, you can share your decks and we will be sure to take a look at them and get back to you. So thank you again. And everybody have a wonderful day and stay healthy. Thank you.